Okay, so in this office hour, we are going to go over 2.6.6 and 2.6.7. I will also post a separate video for 2.6.8, which I've already recorded for period 1. And then sometime over the break, I'll do another video for 2.7. So let's get started with 2.6.6, which is number games. So let's go ahead and open that up. And as always, we really want to look at the directions and make sure we understand them before we start diving into the code. So this class has a few methods for manipulating a number. So we're going to want to look at it looks like it's called number games class. And then the object has already been created for us. We simply need to call the methods indicated, probably in the comments, and then print out the results of each method call. Okay, so it looks like we need to use an object that's created for us, call a method, then print out the result, then call the next method, and then print out the result, and so on. So let's go ahead and take a look. So looking at the tester class, which is where our main method is, we can see that we have already a numbers game object called game. And here is the call to the constructor. So let's see what that does. Let's see what this parameter represents. So I'm going to go to the number games class, and it looks like that is a double number, so it's a decimal point number, and it's called starting number. Okay, so it sets this private instance variable equal to whatever number gets put in here. So in this case, our starting number is 3. Okay, cool. So now if I look at the comments in my tester class, it says I need to double the number and then I need to print it out. So what I want to do is I want to look at the numbers game class, and I want to look for a method that I can call that will double my number. So if I scroll down, this just returns the number, it doesn't double it. So I don't want that. This one says it does double the number, and if we look at the code, we can see that you take the number and then you multiply it by 2. So remember that this is the same thing as num gets num times 2. So you're essentially doubling it, right? So this is the method that I want to call. All right, and notice that, let me go back real quick. Notice that when I call that method, let's see, double number, it's going to return a value. So anytime you see that it returns the value, you need to go ahead and save that value, okay? So let's go ahead and go into the tester class. And what we're gonna do is we're not gonna create a new, we are going to create a double variable. So let's go ahead and do that. So I can call this, let's see, I don't want to call it double because that's a keyword already. So let's just call it a doubled number. Okay, and that's gonna get my object that I call this method on. Okay, so let's break down what's going on here. I am calling double number on my numbers game object. So what I'm doing is I am saying, hey, whatever the object I'm calling this method on, grab the private instance variable called num, so that's up here, and go ahead and multiply it by 2 and then return it. And so we're returning that number now to this variable here called doubled number. So essentially we should be grabbing 3, multiplying it by 2, which is 6, and then storing it to this variable here. So when we print it out, system.out.print line, so I'm going to print out doubled number, I should see 9 get printed out. So let's go ahead and run that. So, oh, I'm sorry, double, so it should be 6, right? And it'll be 6.0 because it's a double type, not an int type. So there's going to be a decimal point number. Okay, so now Let's go ahead and square the number. So now we got to go ahead and look at square number. Okay, so this also returns a variable, a double type. So we're going to call this one. All right, so let's square this number. We got to store it in a double. So I'm going to say squared number gets game dot square number. So now it's going to take that value of 3 and now it's going to square it. So it's going to multiply it by itself. So this is the same thing as num gets num times num. So that time it'll be 9. So if we print that out, system.out.println squared number. For this one, we should get 9 because we're multiplying 3 by itself. Okay, so first we'll see 6.0, and then we'll see, oh, I'm sorry, because we changed it to 6.0, and now we're squaring 6.0. So that's going to be 6 times 6, which is 36. Sorry about that. All right. Now we're going to double the number again. So now the number is 36. So we'll be multiplying 36 times 2. Okay, so again, we're going to do the same exact step up here. But we've already declared doubled number, so we don't need this double part here. We're just going to reassign doubled number to now the result of this, which now if we say game.double number, since the number private instance variable of game is now 36, we're going to be doubling 36. So it's 36 times 2. Right, so if we print that out now we're going to see 72.0. All right, and then last, we want to get the number and store the value. Print it out to see that get number does not modify the number. Okay, so in order to get the number, we need that first method that we saw in this class. So this one right here, get number. So this doesn't modify it at all. It just returns the private instance variable in its current state, which as we saw was 72.0. So let's go ahead and go back there. So we're gonna get the number and store it. So it's a double type. So I'll just call it current value. And then we're gonna say the name of the object, which is game, and then get number, and then print it out, which it should be the same value as the last step, which is 72.0. So let's say current value. All right, so again, we see 72.0 because we're simply just grabbing the value of the current value of the private instance variable after we did those 3 steps. And it's just gonna be what it was during the last step, which is 72.0. All right, so let's go ahead and check the code. And okay, so we only have one object, and then we called double number twice, called square number once, called get number once, and the testing output is also correct. Cool. All right, any questions about this? So it might be a little bit confusing because we started out with 3, then we doubled it. So num became 6. And then we squared num, which was 3, but now it's 6. So after we square it, it becomes 36. And then we double it again, but now this time, we're doubling 36 because that's where it left off. And so that's when it became 72. And of course, when I'm saying that, it's the double version, right? So they tack on a 0.0 and all that good stuff. So up here even is 3.0 technically. And then the final step is just getting the current value. We're not modifying anything, so it's still going to be 72.0. All right. Any questions on that one? All right, let's go ahead and move along if there's no questions. So the next one is construction costs. The construction class is completed for you, so you don't have to do anything in there, but you, of course, you do want to look at it to make sure you understand how to use it. Then you're going to write a program in the main method of this construction tester class, and it's going to ask the user to enter the sales tax rate as a decimal, the number of boards needed, and the number of windows needed. So that means you're going to have to use a scanner object to ask the user for those things. Then, based off of those three values, you're going to create a construction object to compute the cost of lumber and windows. You're going to use $8 for the cost of lumber and $11 for the cost of windows. You're then going to print the total cost, then use the method to compute the tax and print out the grand total, including the tax. And then they give you some sample output. So that's a lot of steps. So let's break that down. Let's just focus here. Let's first focus on just creating our scanner object and asking for the three values from user input. So let's start off with creating our scanner object. Create a scanner object. All right, so to do that, we're going to say scanner. I will call it input, and then we have to call the constructor to create our scanner object. So that's going to be new scanner. And then we always pass in system.in. Okay, so now we have our scanner object. Now we need to start prompting our user for information. So we need to prompt the user. Let's see, for what did we have to prompt the user for? To prompt the user for, let's see, first thing is the sales tax rate. And that's going to be as a decimal. So when we store it, we need a double type. Okay, so prompt the user for a sales tax rate. So we're going to need a print statement for that. System.out.print line. And then let's see what the actual prompt is. Enter sales tax rate. So I'm just going to copy that directly from the assignment. Okay. And now at that point, the user is going to enter in a number, and I want to store it as a double. So I'm going to say double. I'll call it sales tax. And in order to get that from user input, I'm going to use my scanner object, and I'm going to call next double on that object to get the double value from the user input. All right. So that step right there is store the input as a double. All right. Next thing we need to prompt for is how many boards that they need. So I think that makes sense to use an integer, a whole number of boards. So let's see, let's prompt the user for the number of boards. Prompt user for number of boards. So again, that's going to be a print statement. And we'll just copy the prompt directly from the assignment. How many boards do you need? And again, you're expecting a whole number, so we're going to store this as an integer. So I'll call this just num boards. In order to get an integer from user input, we're going to go ahead and call next int on this scanner object. So input.next int. Okay. And that step right there is store the input as an int. And then we have one more value to prompt for. How many windows that they need. So let's next prompt the user for number of windows. So that's another print statement. Okay, and I'll go ahead and copy that from the assignment as well. How many windows do you need? And then finally, let's store this input as an integer because it makes sense that windows are in whole numbers. So we're going to store that as an int. We'll call it num windows. And then again, we need to call next int on our scanner object to get that whole number out of there. Okay, so now we've got all three values, and we're going to use these three values to create a construction object. So notice that the construction object has the price per board, it has the price per square inch, and it has the tax rate. Okay, so this is a little confusing because we just prompted for the number of windows and the number of boards. We didn't prompt for the price. They told us specific numbers to use instead, but we did prompt for the tax rate. So we will pass that into this constructor. So we're using this constructor right here that takes three different values. So I'm gonna copy this just so I know what it's expecting. So my next step is to instantiate a construction object. And I'm going to be using this constructor to do that. Okay, so I need the lumber cost, I need the window cost, and I need the tax rate. And those are all decimal point numbers, doubles. Okay. So if I look at the directions, I can see that I need to use $8 for the cost of lumber and $11 for the cost of windows. So I'm going to put that in my comments here too. And then for taxes, I am just going to use my sale tax rate that I got from the user. Okay, so let's go ahead and create this construction object. So I want to start out by saying the name of the class. So that's my data type. So construction. And then I want to come up with a variable name. So I could just call this, I don't know, C1 for, you know, the first construction object that I create. And then I want to call the constructor. So it's going to be new construction. And I want to pass in these three values in this order. So first I want to pass in the lumber cost. And my lumber cost should be $11. So I'm just going to put 11. This will get passed in technically as 11.0. If you want to put 11.0, that's fine. Or you can leave it like this and it'll automatically put the 0.0 for you. The next thing is going to be the cost of, the cost of lumber is 8. So first is lumber cost, so we're going to put 8. And then we need to put the window cost, which it says we should use 11 for. So I'm going to put 11 in there. And then the last thing we need is the taxes, which we got from user input and stored as sales tax. So that'll be our third value that we pass in to create this construction object. Okay, cool. Now we have the construction object. What do we got to do next? We have to compute the cost of lumber and windows. So I'm pretty sure that there's probably a method inside of this class that will do that for us. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so it looks like we can calculate the lumber cost by calling this method on our construction object and passing in the number of boards that we need, which again, we got from user input, so we can pass that in. And the same thing goes for window cost. So let's go ahead and calculate the cost of our lumber first. Nope. Okay, so next we're going to calculate cost of lumber. I'm going to put total cost. Okay, so if we take a look at that method, we can see that it's going to return a double value. So that means that we're going to get a decimal point number back. So we should store it into a double type variable. All right, so if we go back here, I'm going to say, I'm going to store a double called, let's see, lumber, let's call it total lumber cost, just so that we're really clear. And we're going to calculate that by taking our construction object, C1, and we're going to call that method lumber cost. And in here, we need to pass in an integer that is the number of boards. And we have that already. We got that from user input and we stored it into this variable called numBoards. So that's what I'm going to put inside here. All right. So what that's going to do is going to pass in this number, numBoards, to lumber cost right in here. And it's going to use it in this calculation. So it'll take that number of boards that we put in to user input and it'll multiply it by the lumber cost, okay? Because this represents the lumber cost here, up here. This is the price per board. And then it's gonna return that value. And then since it returns it, it's gonna, we're gonna be storing it to this variable here, total lumber cost. So now we wanna do the same thing for calculating the total cost of, I think it's the windows. Let's double check. The total cost, yeah, so we want to compute the cost of windows as well. Cool. So for that, it's going to be the same process. It's that method is also going to return a double. So if you scroll down here, window cost right here, this returns a double, and then it's expecting a whole number for the number of windows. So we're going to be calling this one next. Okay, the variable that we will store the result in, let's call it total window cost. And we are going to call the window cost method on our construction object. So let's go ahead and paste that in. So here's where we're going to pass in our integer that represents the number of windows, which we stored as num windows here. Okay, so now we have that. And then last, let's see, we want to print the total cost because we've already computed the cost of lumber and windows. Now we want to figure out what is the total cost. So that's going to be our total lumber cost and our total window cost, and then also sales tax, right? Let's take a look at the construction class to see if there's a special method for that as well. So I'm going to scroll down, and it looks like what we want to do is we're going to calculate the total. So we're going to add together the window cost and the lumber cost, and then we're going to pass that in to this grand total method. So let's first add these two numbers together that we got, the window cost and the lumber cost. So I'm going to say, I'm going to calculate total cost before tax, okay? This is going to be the before tax cost. So I'm going to say double, let's call it subtotal, gets, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add these two values together. I'm going to add total lumber cost, and I'm going to add total window cost. Okay, So that's going to give me the cost before tax. But to figure out the grand total, I'm going to calculate the grand total. That's where that method comes into play. Grand total right here. So grand total expects a double value, which we just calculated, and it's going to return a double after doing this calculation here. So it's going to take that decimal point number that we just calculated and then multiply it by 1 plus the tax rate to give us the grand total. All right, so this is the method that we want. So let's go ahead and say double grand total is going to be C1 dot grand total. And now here, it's expecting a double that represents our total, which we stored as subtotal. So I'm going to go ahead and put that there, subtotal. All right, so now we have the grand total calculated. I think the last step is just to print it out. Let's see. We want to print the total costs and we want to print the grand total. Okay, cool. So actually in between these two steps, actually, no, we could just do it here. So I want to first print the total before tax, and then I want to print the grand total, the total with the tax. So I need two print statements. I need to print out, oops, print, oh my gosh, there we go. And I think they want us to put the words there too, like total. So put total, colon, space, and then we'll go ahead and concatenate the subtotal value to that. And then we will do the same thing now for grand total. So let me just actually copy that line and then we'll modify it. Okay, so for this one, we're gonna print out the grand total, and then we'll be printing out grand total. Okay, so that should be good. Let's go ahead and check it. Run the code. Remember, it's using user input, so we're gonna have to test stuff out. So let me use these values here. I'll go ahead and put these as a comment so we can evaluate this stuff. So just so that we can see that it's working correctly, because then we can match the values up. All right, let's go back over here, run the code. All right, so let's enter the sales tax rate. They put in 0.08. How many boards? 10. How many windows? 5. And then we should see the total as 135. And then the grand total is 145.80. There we go. Cool. So that checks out. So you don't need these comments in here. I was just using that as a test. Now if we click check code, it will test a bunch of different inputs to see if it's consistently finding the correct results. Might have to reload actually. Let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna reload. Check code, there we go. All right, it says one little O, just because I capitalized the T, or I didn't capitalize the T, it wants that capitalized. So let's go ahead and rerun that. All right, there we go. Now it's happy. Sometimes it's very particular. All right, so that had a lot of steps. So the key here is breaking down things, putting in the comments of, putting the steps down in the comments to really help yourself kind of break down what it's asking you and break it down into easier to digest steps. So a lot of different steps for this one. Any questions for this one? All right. So like I said, I already worked through 2.6.8. That one actually, that took a while. That one's pretty long too. So I will post that as a separate video from this one, and then let's call it a day early today, and I will make a recording for 2.7. I'll try to do that maybe tomorrow, if not Sunday, and get that posted. So, all right. I hope you all have a great break. Let me stop this recording. If you have any questions in the meantime, let me know or send me a message.